The East Coast is dealing with an intense heat wave. It's so hot, anti-mask people don't even have the energy to throw a fit in Costco. The Bahamas aren't allowing Americans to visit, so it looks like 20-year-old YouTube stars will have to take Molly and pump their fist to electronic music in Madison, Wisconsin. Polar bears may become extinct as a result of shrinking sea ice in the Arctic. Fine. More Coca-Cola for the rest of us. And finally, President Trump says New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Baltimore, and Oakland are all cities run by the radical left. Then again, according to Trump, the radical left includes everyone who isn't down to date their own daughter. Someone who does not fit that situation, though, is joining us now. Welcome to the Trump Report. It is indeed myself, Chelsea, and Scott, the S-Man 80. Scott, thank you for joining us. Tamra was experiencing technical difficulties, so we are going to have to hammer those out before next time. But welcome to our show in a slightly different place. We're here on the Blackcast YouTube channel, which is my personal YouTube page, because our home at AfterBuzz TV is, as they say, on pause. And we hope to gear up back over there by the fall. But there's too much to talk about. First thing to talk about, happy anniversary to us. We did our first show 4 years ago, just a couple days ago, because it was Trump versus Hillary. We started with the convention. So congratulations to us. If there's anything that could drive you to drink, it's talking about all of this for the last 4 months. And there's, of course, plenty of Trump to report on, as always. But I wanted to start off with a story that I know Chelsea was keeping an eye on. I think we should all be keeping an eye on it. And it's what's going on in Portland. And I think that there have been some degree of unrest there for, 56 days now, 55 days. So it's been, you can understand there being concern, but it's one thing to bring in the National Guard when maybe your state or city doesn't want it. It's another thing to, by all reports, it's like unmarked cars dragging people off the streets. It's, well, not to get melodramatic, but it's very Stasi of them. It's very secret police. And Chelsea, from, you can talk about it from the human standpoint, but I'd like you to weigh in from a legal standpoint as to what's going on there in Portland.
Well, this is one of those situations where it doesn't take a law degree to know that this is illegal, unconstitutional, and it should just, I know that nothing that Trump does should shock us anymore, but this should be truly shocking and truly frightening. I know that people in the White House accuse Dr. Fauci of being an alarmist. I want everybody to heed this alarm. This is like, I don't know what level of buzzers alarm should be going off for all of us, because this is just the beginning of something authoritarian. It started in Portland. I think it was just a test to see how the country would react. And most of us are like, oh, there goes Trump being Trump. This is not cool, but whatever. And then it's going to spread to Chicago. He's already announced 150 federal forces going into Chicago for 60 days. And then it will keep going. And before you know it, we will have federal forces in any city that the president chooses. Of course, he's choosing democratically run cities. But this is the antithesis of democracy and states' rights that conservatives are always yelling about protecting. I just can't see how anybody is okay with this. And I don't think we should just be keeping one eye on this. It should be both of the eyes. This is more dangerous as a country, I think, than to the existence of the country as we know it, than maybe even the virus, or at least it's right up there with it. I don't know. Maybe you think I'm being too alarmist, but this is the level of intensity that I have.
No, no. And look, I think that unfortunately everything happens. You have to take up on everything, and the virus is a good example. Now, the way to always frame this is, okay, so maybe you feel like Trump is within his rights to do this and go into these cities. How would you feel if 6 years ago President Obama had gone into, I was going to say Atlanta, but that's a fairly left-leaning city. But to go into very red cities in very red states and trying to quell protests that were going on. It's obviously a hypothetical, but you unfortunately have to look at it like, okay, what if it was the other way? Because it's a lot of that you just unfortunately have to look at it. And I think you could be as tried and true a Trump supporter as there is, and still look at this and go, I understand the desire to stop this sort of unrest, for lack of, the protests, whatever it is, but this doesn't seem to be the way to go about it. Scott, how do you see this from the political standpoint, but also it should be an apolitical issue, but of course I don't think we really have many of those these days.
Yeah, I was going to say, from the political standpoint, it's playing into his law and order. It's like him being able to say it's like, look, we're going into these radical left run cities, and we're going to make sure that we have law and order everywhere, and we're going to go in and we're going to handle it, and it's going to be taken care of, so that he can come in to his voters and say, look at what I did, and this is what's going to happen. And he's playing this all off like, if Biden wins, then the entire country is going to be like this, which is absolutely BS. And then the second layer of a problem that you do have, though, is you have an acting secretary of Homeland Security. You have Chad Wolf, who's not even been appointed except by the president. So it lends itself to even more of that authoritarianness, because he was never even approved by the Senate. So you have someone there that's now saying, oh, I don't need an invite to come into cities or states that are having issues. We, can do basically whatever we want. As these cities and states, like in Oregon and in Chicago and Illinois, have been saying, we don't want you there. So it is leading to a political, optics for Trump. But the dangerous level is what Chelsea was saying, is now you're having federal secret police, for all intents and purposes, going in, unmarked, unidentified, into cities that have not asked for that. And to me, there is a very big difference. It's one thing if the city of Portland said, yes, we want your help to, deal with these federal property, that would be great for you to come in. But when you're not being asked, that's where you start having the issues there. And so even if he's trying to do this as a political optics, it's going down a very dangerous path that, like Chelsea was saying, could lead to more of this as we get closer to the election, as he's desperate at this point to get at any of his base, because at this point, he is way behind, and so he's going to get more desperate as we get closer to the election.
Yeah, and obviously Chelsea's right. This is a bigger issue, one we have to keep an eye on. Edward, as you said, both eyes. But you did sort of mention the desperation as it comes to campaign politics, and I'm pretty sure I said weeks ago, if not months ago, definitely weeks ago on this very show, that when you start to see Trump in a mask, that's when he realizes he's in trouble, because the whole thing was built on, I'm not wearing a mask. Masks are for losers. Look at how stupid Biden looks. Let's be honest. He did look a little stupid with the mask and those sunglasses. He should at least get Jill to help him accessorize. I know you don't get out of the basement much, but you should still have a stylist, even if it's a virtual stylist. But I think that it's so there's the tweet, which he said that some people say it's patriotic to wear a mask. No one is more patriotic than me, your favorite president. It had been a while since he called himself our favorite president. I love when he calls himself our favorite president, because I think that even people who love him, they're like, I mean, you're at least number 3 on my list. But I mean, Reagan has to be somebody favorite president. It's like, somebody on Mount Rushmore, at least one of those is going to be more your favorite. Maybe all of them. I don't know. But in any case, Scott, I wanted to kind of shift it to the political sort of aspect of that. When you saw that picture, what what was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw Trump not just like, secretly being photographed wearing one, but hey, check out my mask.
Yeah, it was exactly what you said. You know that it's desperate if he's having to go that route. And there are a lot of Republican governors in big states like Greg Abbott, for instance, that have probably been like, hey, you've got to do this now because we're at a tipping point now for our state. So like you said, as soon as you knew that he was going to be wearing that mask, he knew that it's an issue. And now bringing back these coronavirus daily briefings is the second phase of that. Since he can't really go out and campaign, he's going to use this time to have live campaign rallies every day again. And so, yes, these are both things to know that he knows he's way behind, and he's got to try to take control of the agenda again. And this is how he's doing it. I of course called him a fool on Twitter right away, because it was like, okay, now 140,000 deaths later and everything, now you're going to act like this is now a big thing, and it's a little too late for that. So especially with everything else going on.
Well, and of course, look, there's a little bit less than 4 months. There's still plenty of time. And as someone that we reference a lot on this show, Scott and I both pay attention to, Dr. Larry Sabato makes the point, polls are not votes. He tweeted that like 10 times into a single tweet, just reminding everyone that it really doesn't matter how it's polling. Even the earliest voting does not start in July. So there's still time for people to be convinced and won over. And the playing off the virus, like, I think we're going to wake up one day and it'll just disappear, which, by the way, if I woke up tomorrow and he was right about that, I'd be like, oh, thank God. President Trump was so right about that. I would be so happy to say, like, yeah, it's the damnedest thing. That virus, it's just gone. I wish he was right about that. There's a lot of things that it would be great. So, Chelsea, you see that, and then there's obviously personal feelings you may have, but what does that say about the bigger picture of the actual race for the presidency?
I know that there's always the possibility that this quote unquote silent majority is just sitting out right now, quietly, still obsessed with Trump. I just cannot really comprehend who those people can be and how they can still hold on to this. I mean, cognitive dissonance, yes, they're going to try and, defend because the person that they voted for is so different from the one that they probably wanted. But I just at this point, I mean, yes, I was shocked last time with how wrong the polls were, but it's like I would be exponentially more shocked if still, after all of this, that there really is still this majority out there that will vote for him enough to get him the electoral votes. Right. What has he done? I mean, even, the China trade deal, that's like not even a thing anymore. They can't even go forward because of the virus. I mean, so any border wall, I mean, Mexico,
there's a few new miles of that border wall. I've seen a few new miles of it, but to your point, I think this is a little bit obviously devil's advocate. A lot of people make this point. If you are planning on voting for President Trump and a stranger calls you at your house and it's like, hi, you don't know me, but in these very divisive political times, will you tell me whether or not you support President Trump? What? No, of course I don't. Stranger on the phone. I don't like anything about him. So I think that you're going to have, I think that's outside the margin of error. I think more than 4% of people answering phone calls like that are going to be like, no, I'm not going to vote for President Trump. Now, what number that is, that remains to be seen. But I think that's why that's why I think Trump wearing the mask, that means his internal polling is saying this, not your Quinnipiac or Marist College, my alma mater, thank you, or any of those polls. I mean, those are literally calling people at home and on their cell phones, on their, they used to do polling on landline. So it was like, well, then great. You're going to ask everybody's grandparents what they think, which not that their votes aren't important, but you're only asking them. Scott, what level do you think there is of people who, maybe they don't even love him. They're just like, yeah, but I'm going to vote for him because, maybe they're single issue voters. Like, yeah, I want more conservatives on the Supreme Court. Do you think that for the most part, they're inclined to not tell anyone, especially a stranger calling them, or I guess people aren't really stopping you in person for polling these days. But I think that I don't know what the number is. Somebody smarter than me should say, but it's more than 4% for sure.
Well, I mean, I first of all, the polls were off in some of the states, but not by much when you look at the very end. And you have to consider again that Hillary did win the popular vote because it went down to about 2% or so. So the polls were off, yes, and they were definitely off in those, the old blue wall of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. But you see the small amount that he won in each of those states, and it really could have shifted either direction. And I think a lot of voters at the last minute probably went back and voted for Trump. Yes, there's definitely a percentage of people. I don't know if it's going to be as much as it was in 2016, though. I think now it's like, okay, he's the incumbent. I think the numbers are going to be less. There is still going to be numbers there of people that are going to refuse to say truthfully that they're voting for him. But I think the numbers are less. And I also believe that now as the incumbent, he has less support. He has not built or expanded his base at all, which we've talked about throughout the years. And that's a major issue for a president running for a second term, is that you have not brought any more people into your base, and you've only focused on that narrow base. And that number is continuing to shrink over time, not expand, just population-wise in general. So you're going after sort of a losing demographic in the long term. And Republicans have even said that you can read articles, and this goes back to even 2012. I think they had one last gasp in 2016 here with Trump getting some of those voters off the sidelines. But that particular demographic is continuing to shrink, and it's a losing strategy over time. So I don't think that it's going to be as big of a number. It might be 2, maybe 3%, but there's also a whole group of voters that are not going to come out that maybe sat out in 2016 that are going to be voting for his opposition. But of course, there's Trump voters that are going to be voting for the Supreme Court or to protect gun rights or whatever it is that they think that he or Republican administration will do. But I don't think it's going to be as big of a number as it was in 16.
Yeah, no. I think that there's a lot of truth to that, and yeah, I mean, it's like the polls. Honestly, whichever way they went, if you flipped what all the votes were in places like Wisconsin, none of the polls would have been right anyway. You know what I mean? It's just they were so close, obviously, well within the margin of error. I'm going to circle back to our earlier topic because we have some people in the chat, and when we're here, look at this. I can show off our comments in the chat. Kame Egan points out Trump is sending federal agents to Chicago to help the Chicago PD combat violence. Mayor Lightfoot said that they're to stop protests. It's unacceptable. I had no idea that Gordon Lightfoot was the mayor there in Windy City. Now, an opposing viewpoint, I told Steve that this would get in here. Steve Schlembeck, what about the argument that feds in Portland are there to defend federal property? And he has one other point. Unmarked vehicles seem like a red herring, as local PDs and state police routinely use unmarked cars and make arrests. I understand that second point, but what I would say, wait, hang on. What I would say is those are people that are licensed to be practicing law enforcement in that district. This isn't just feds coming in. Now, Chelsea, your thoughts.
And they're usually individually identified. They've got like a badge with a name and a number so that they're identifiable. If Trump wanted to send, say, the National Guard to stand around the federal courthouses, sure. Okay. But they would just stand there defending the property. Going around and chasing these people and picking them up and putting them in a van and doing God knows what with them, that is totally and completely unacceptable. If you look at the Constitution, it just is. The only way around that I could see is if these people just went to go stand on the property to defend it. But that's not what we're seeing here.
Yeah, no, there would be something to that. But Scott, what do you think about the point that Steve made? This is they're there to defend federal property, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Even if it was, 80% of the things that they did were protecting federal property, which it's not. What are some of your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with Chelsea, and it's also we've been hearing things about these unmarked officers instigating and sometimes helping to rile up protesters as well. And to Chelsea's point, if it was really an issue of protecting federal property, then you bring in a National Guard, you protect it from there, and then if people are really becoming violent or something, they're not going to be able to go through with a National Guard there. So bringing unmarked vehicles and taking people away and somewhat instigating and riling people up is not diffusing the situation. And I'd also add to the point, when you have unmarked vehicles for local police, they're usually doing some kind of an investigation.
Right.
It's a different thing again than just randomly showing up on a street corner and whisking people away. So very big differences between what Chelsea was saying, having a National Guard there to keep people from defacing federal property versus having random federalized police coming in and taking people away, or in some cases inciting the violence or not, instead of diffusing it. So it's a very big difference.
Back to Cam Egan. Our mayor is Grady from Sanford and Son. If you're going to make a Sanford and Son reference, I'm going to get it on the show. But he did ask this question as well. Do you think Trump has a good chance of being reelected, or is Biden going to sweep the election? I would say that nobody is sweeping any election this year. I don't think it's a breeze for anyone. That's just not the way I see it. I think that public sentiment. I don't see it as impossible as Trump gets reelected. Perhaps closer to November, I could feel differently. But the people, we've talked a lot on this show. The people who are dug in on him, it actually doesn't matter what they do. He's famously said 4 years ago he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. He could shoot everyone on Fifth Avenue. And there are people who are like, yeah, but come on. So I think that the election will be close. I don't think that, I think that the popular vote will be very much like last year. It just depends on what adds up to 270. Am I just a gloomy Gus, Chelsea? Am I looking at this wrong?
I don't know. The fact that Ted Cruz is worried about Texas turning blue means that maybe it's not going to be.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment.
I
was surprised. Yeah, I know. Ted Cruz was so surprised he's actually going to start wearing masks on airplanes. That's how surprised he was.
I don't think if Biden gets it in a way that I don't think the Electoral College may not be as close as we think. If certain things hold, because look, if Biden is able to peel away places like Florida again, which went to Obama both times, and North Carolina and Arizona, and you get those upper Midwest, the old blue wall back, then he does kind of run away with the Electoral College. But I do agree that at some point, even though some of these polls are saying like places even like Alaska are very close, and certain areas like Kansas, there are some polls that are saying those states are close, but at the end of the day, I do think that a lot of those states will come home to roost again in the sense that a lot of these places will tighten up and eventually go more in the direction they have been. But the swing states are up for grabs for sure, and that's why they're called a swing state for a reason. And if Biden is able to take the majority of those states away, I mean, we even see it's very close in Iowa and Georgia, and Ohio, which were not close last time. Those states, not including Georgia, have gone to Obama in 08 and 12. If those states go back, then Biden really has a substantial Electoral College victory, and that could even keep Trump below 200 Electoral College votes. So yes, there's either way. It could tighten up as we get close to the election, but at this point, Biden has a much bigger lead than Hillary Clinton ever had. So there is a chance that there is going to be a remaking, especially in the Sun Belt states, like we're saying. It could be close in Texas. Arizona could now be blue for the first time since the 90s. So there's a lot of things that could actually shift in this election to make it not so close in the Electoral College for Trump. But at the same token, you could see him win too by the smallest margins and lose the popular vote by over 5 million. I mean, it's still, you've got to win. So Yeah.
I think however it goes down, we're not going to find out who is president by November 4th. It's going to be fought and litigated, and every state that had mail-in votes, it's going, I mean, we'll people are hoping he'll like resign the next day and then we'll immediately have, Biden in there, but he might drag it out,
No,
until
and let's
January
be honest,
20th.
even if it looks like, even if it's a clear victory for President Trump, the Biden people aren't going to quickly concede either. Either way it goes, it will be. First of all, I think the counting of the votes will take a long time because of so there just won't even be a good guess that next day, that Wednesday. And then once you have, okay, here's who won, then is the next step. And I think that's one of the things that'll be most interesting. It's one of the more telling things that President Trump said is that he's not committing to that idea that, he'll concede, but obviously you want to leave the door open from a legal standpoint. And there has to be a certain point. And if this were a movie, I think what they would want is for at 11:59 a.m. on January 20th, him to be refusing to lose the office and leave the office, and then you basically have like the military come and sweep in and drag him out. I think that's what a lot of people would want to see, actually, even if it's not a movie. They're just, just to see him, see them like basically being thrown out, like an angry girlfriend just like throws all of his shit on the front lawn and be like, take your CDs too, dick.
But in the movie, does he get to negotiate a plea deal or this like, I'll leave now if you don't prosecute me, and I'm taking Ivanka with me, but you can have the rest of them? I mean, this. Do you think he's going to try something like this?
Well, looser FCC regulations on Trump TV. That's probably the deal that he would strike. I don't know. I do think that there's a number where everybody around him is going to be like, it's not even close. You can take it to court if you want to, but we, as the people you trust, as in basically only Ivanka, we are telling you that there's no changing in this. So do you want to try and be magnanimous and just be like, I'm within my rights to challenge this, but I think it's better for the country that we begin healing now. But I've still got 2.5 months to burn this shit down to the ground.
Right. I was going to say he won't care about what's best for the country. He's only going to care what's good for him. But the thing we're forgetting is,
no, he wouldn't really care. He would just say he cares. He wouldn't care.
But once it's certified, once the Electoral College is certified in December, it really doesn't matter what he says anymore. And at 11:59 a.m., it doesn't matter what he does anymore because again, the Constitution is a presidential term. Goes to a certain point, so he essentially turns into a pumpkin for all intents and purposes because he's no longer.
I mean, he's already a pumpkin,
but he will no longer have the power of the presidency behind him as of noon that day, regardless of what he says or does.
Fair.
The Constitution is very explicit. The term expires, and he will no longer be president in any sense, in that capacity. So he can sit around in the White House, and they can, figure out how they're pulling him out of there. But he will no longer technically be president after that term expires. You can't just, expand the term for any, and Congress can't do that either. So there is protocols in place that he just won't be able to do that. He would have to have already had the Supreme Court make some kind of, thing to say whatever's happening with the election and what, but he can't change the terms.
Can I ask you guys like on a quick little question? I don't know if you saw Nancy Pelosi's statements yesterday about how they're going to fumigate the White House. I get. That doesn't work. I mean, I get it, but like, no, shut up. Don't say stuff like that. Or am I the only one that thinks?
She's not as good at talking like Trump as Trump is. Like he can get away with saying stuff like that. I'm not saying, look, I'm sure she's a career politician. I'm sure she's very smart in certain areas. That's not something she's good at, is trying to be funny off the cuff and making these grand generalizations. I read that and I was just like, ugh, What did you think,
I mean, look,
Scott?
I've said it, and I've said it many times to them on Twitter, and I actually am not even being funny about it. I think they do need to fumigate it after that trash. But yes, I agree with you. She should not be doing that kind of stuff because, again, it plays into his stupid playbook, which, you know, it doesn't do anyone any favors. As much as we may jokingly agree with it or not, I do say, Chelsea, yeah, you're right. I mean, it doesn't play into any positive to be stooping to that level and thinking
I
it's
mean,
funny.
maybe
Because,
if she had said "sage it," you know,
yeah,
called
that would be
smudging, you know,
Marianne
maybe that would
Williamson.
have gone over better. But fumigating is a little.
I want to ask each of you what you think about one of. Well, let me just say that by my estimation, we haven't had Tim Russert in a long time. And if you think about anybody who watched Meet the Press when he was on there, if you just think about what he would have had to say in the interviews he would have done in the, let's say it's the last 12 years now. But I do think that of the people who have that job, I've long thought that Chris Wallace is the one who isn't like him stylistically, but he's really tough on everybody. If we're making it a popularity contest, I just physically can't watch Chuck Todd. And I don't like anything about his style, but you know, Chris Wallace really grilling President Trump and then, you know, being invited on Fox to kind of take a victory lap. And he's like, look, I asked him questions that I think people need to ask him, but give him credit. Joe Biden doesn't come out of the basement, you know? So it's not like, yeah. And by the way, Steve agrees with me. Tim Russert was great and sorely missed. I think it was very clear to know where Tim Russert's politics were, but if you just read transcripts of his questions, you didn't feel like, oh, that was really loaded in favor of it. And I think Chris Wallace is one of the people who does that. And look, that interview for Trump, yeah, that was pretty brutal. The things he asked, and you know it's bad because conservatives talk about how much they hate him now. You know, and they've been saying that for a while because obviously Fox News isn't where you go for your trusted news. You go to One America News. That is where you get your trusted news. So what did you think? I'll ask you first, Chelsea. Whether you saw the whole interview or just clips and read about it, what did you think about the sit down that Chris Wallace had with President Trump?
I think from an objective standpoint, you're right. It looked fair. It looked like he wasn't trying to be on any one side, even when he would correct, like, no, sir, that's not true. That, you know, Biden's plan talks about defunding the police. He was still very, like, not even argumentative about it. It was just like, sir, that's not in there. It was, I think it was well done. I can't remember what was the point at which Chris Wallace said, oh, I agree with you on something, I think related to the virus. And that part was like, what? I mean, I get that he was trying to have some sort of ground of agreement with the president, probably to not just piss him off and have him just leave, which he looked like he was about to do at any minute now. And I think the fact that this was on Fox News was incredibly damaging for the president, and him having to, you know, ask Kayleigh Mack, what were those numbers again? See here, yeah, we're number one in lowest mortality in the world, which is in a very easily fact-checked thing. That we're not. I can't. But again, I cannot. In this situation, get myself into the mind of a Trump supporter to look at that and be like, oh wow, that president makes me proud. I can't see how anybody would
Scott, from a political theater standpoint, from somebody watching it, what are your thoughts? But then also the impact an interview like that has, you think?
Well, I was going to say, you know, the daytime Fox is sort of like the difference between what Nickelodeon and then Nick at Night was back in the day. It's like you go from news during the day,
yeah,
and then you switch to entertainment at night.
Yeah, well, that's, you know what? Let me just interrupt.
You know?
It's not that far off that Fox News at night is basically Green Acres reruns. So yeah, you're not entirely far off.
So,
and everybody in the
mean,
chat, it's just a joke. It's all right. We're just having fun.
But Chris Wallace is that kind of old school journalist. You know, it comes from like his dad was an old school journalist, and so he still carries that with him, and he carries that. So there is that balanced approach, and to ask the questions and not have a like a lot of media does today, have an agenda in mind. So I think he really plays that well, and really that's part of who he is. I mean, I really enjoyed the town halls that they had with the Democratic candidates that he lead earlier this year with like Pete Buttigieg. When they had everybody, I thought he asked great questions for those Fox town halls. I've always respected him, and I think he did a good job with that. I think, again, if you go back and look at it in general, it doesn't look good for Trump at all, because there he is, sweaty. It's hot outside, so he didn't look good, and it kind of reminded me of going back to the 1960 debate with Nixon. And then you see him on Twitter today, and Trump's acting how great it was, and that it was 100 degrees outside, and considering it was so hot, how good, basically how good he looked and everything. So I don't think it was a good interview for him at all, like just visually, because he didn't look great, sweating there in the heat. But I think also the questions, literally and figuratively, under the heat from the questions that Chris asked him, it was not allowing him to sort of get away with some of these ridiculous statements that he does. Because now it's like he basically just makes up crap about Biden. All of a sudden there's no single family homes, and he's not going to allow windows in homes, and it's like he's just making up such ridiculous things now that it's important to have a respected journalist be able to fact check him, and for that to happen on Fox News, I think is incredibly important as we get closer to the election, because it's absurd to otherwise let this stuff go away without answering it.
Well, you invoked Nixon JFK and the debate that, it was sort of the first television debate, because everybody who listened to it on radio thought Nixon won, but anybody who saw it on TV were like, yeah, this guy's a sweat act. And literally. So, and we've talked about it a few times, and a comedian friend of mine, my friend Tom Kelly, made this point on Twitter that I honestly hadn't really thought about it. When there are debates, and as I tend to say, if there are debates, but when there are debates, there's not going to be an audience for them. And that is such a huge disadvantage for President Trump, because when we were talking about this back in January, or honestly, even when we were talking about it in March or April, the idea that there would be these debates, it's like, yeah, Biden's going to get flustered by the crowd. Trump's really going to, he'll rile people up, and you're not going to have that. If they're in a room together, which is arguable, by the way, but in theory, you would have the two candidates and a moderator, possibly a couple moderators, maybe you switch during, it depends on what the format is that they agree on. I'm sure that Trump just wants to do an extra, like an extra long episode of Fox and Friends, but even then there won't be an audience. It'll just be Steve Doocy. But I think that the idea that that's what it's going to be, I've long thought that Biden's wouldn't be tremendous in that debate setting, but the one that I just outlined, I mean, he could not have, the Biden campaign could not have come up with a better wish list then. So no people are going to be allowed inside. It's going to just be the two of you talking, which, by the way, how much better is that going to be for a debate anyway? What do you think, Chelsea?
I think the debate should look like what we look like right now, except that where Scott would be the moderator, and it just, question asked. And then when you go over the time, you just get muted.
I like that.
And we'll have our first ever virtual debates.
Yeah. No, I think that the only problem with that is it's like, sorry, I can't hear the question. What was that? You know what I mean? And
well, then look, you miss your turn.
Biden's going to do this at some point. He's going to put his thumb over the lens, be like, I thought I saw something. But yeah, look, I think that and again, I'm still not convinced that there will be debates. I mean, we've got these plans for conventions that nobody wants to go to these conventions. But you've got. I mean,
I don't know if this is mean to say, but I'm like, if the Republicans want to go to a convention, have at it, guys. I mean, the fact that the sheriff in Florida is like, I can't keep you guys safe. I'm really sorry about that. He's trying to absolve himself of responsibility way out in advance.
Yeah. Well, remember that the convention moved because Charlotte was like, yeah, we can't have this big event. And now, of course, it's not going to be the big event. That's how much
Yep.
that changed. But
Mhm.
I'm sure that Charlotte is like, oh, we're so glad that we're out from under this thing, you know? But you've got John Kasich is going to speak at the Democratic National Convention, which I'm just like, you could do better than that. You know, if you got like Scott Baio to say he was going to vote for Biden, that's a better get
Antonio
than John
Sabato
Kasich.
Jr.
Yeah, exactly. If you start picking off some of those celebrities, like Clint Eastwood says he's going to be, well, Clint Eastwood actually, that would be pretty great, especially if he talked to an empty chair again. But you got and look, it's very easy for Trump to point at somebody like John Kasich. Well, the guy's a loser. I beat him. But George Will says he's voting for Joe Biden, and you can call George Will stupid. And the only thing stupid about George Will, I think, is that he's a Cubs fan. And even that paid off for him. Eventually, it worked out for him. So, you know, the idea that George Will is stupid is preposterous. You know, again, I don't trust anybody that wears a bow tie, but let's not get bogged down in that. But the idea that, you know, it's just like, yeah, I'm going to vote for the first Democrat in my life because this is so bad. And I mean, it's, you know, you can point to, you know, guys like Bill Kristol from, well, formerly the Weekly Standard. You just, all these people are like, yeah, we're not voting for this guy. This is really bad for not just the party, but for the country. So you're seeing this, and just imagine trying to put people on a stage, whether it's all virtual. And yeah, you already referenced the point that physically they're telling people not to come to the building. Police are like, yeah, look, we can't keep you safe. And they're trying to do things at outdoor venues. And I don't know what, and we'll talk about those, the conventions when they happen next month, but I still can't imagine what they look like. Scott, what do you think realistically? We can talk about both conventions, but let's start with the Republican convention because that's the one that's more in the news, I would say.
You mean as how it's going to look?
Yeah, I mean, what it'll look like for
in?
us, what it'll look like for us watching at home, but still wearing masks because we don't want any germs to come through the TV screen.
Yeah, exactly. I actually I think it's going to be very interesting because we've already seen a lot of senators kind of distance themselves from even going to begin with. So it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of I guess luminaries from the party end up showing up. And how does it look in the next month as far as the caseloads in Florida? You know, are they still trending really high? Are there going to be a lot of people that are going to show up and defy wearing masks? And you know, I think it's going to be very interesting the next, like, I'd say next 2 or 3 weeks, because it's about a month away, how everything's looking in Florida and how people are feeling about going. Otherwise, I think it'll be interesting how they're going to do the camera angles, you know, to make it seem like it's more boisterous. How they're going to do that is going to be very interesting because we've never seen anything like this on any convention. Because usually they're just huge parties, you know, filled to the rafters, people loud, going, you know. So it's going to be a whole different thing. And as we were saying earlier, it's definitely not going to play well for Trump, who that's what he feeds off of. So if he doesn't have that crowd, it's going to be a whole different thing for him.
He's like a cancer starved of you know, sugar and stuff. Like
well, Chelsea, what do you think about this idea? Idea, Chelsea, considering that they want to have it in Florida, how about having it at Disney World? It's open. There's security already there. You know, you can just get some people lined up and down Main Street, or maybe the waiting area outside of It's a Small World. I don't know. I mean, what do you think it's going to really look like for us to watch these conventions?
I think what we're going to watch is going to be a very cheap attempt at making it look bigger and grander than it really is. And there's not going to be a really great way to do it. But that is what Trump is, you know, riding down the escalator, very intentional, like he's coming down from above to come save, you know, us down here. You know, so these kinds of visuals are very important to him, and he's going to want to repeat those kinds but it's not going to be possible. I mean, even if they can come up with a really great background or set, because it's not real, and he's not going to get fed from that, and he's not going to be able to thrive. get through it. He'll survive it. It'll be like fine. But this is what he lives for, having like a stadium full of people adoring and cheering, and that he doesn't get that is just, I don't know if he's capable of feeling heartbreak, because unlike Mary Trump, I am certain that he is a sociopath. But if he was capable of feeling heartbreak, that would be the most heartbreaking moment of his life.
Look, if they're, and they're not looking to me for unsolicited advice, but if you want that idea that it's big, you go as big as you can, and you say like, yeah, he's gonna give the acceptance, like at the Grand Canyon. There's gonna be a couple hundred people there to watch him. It's gonna be outdoors. What are you gonna say about that? And then just the vision of that on TV is like, look, there he is. That's America, and it's federal land, so basically, technically it's his because he's the president. That's what they would say anyway. So I think that, yeah, the idea of doing it bigger, it's like, don't just do it at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers stadium, because it's outdoors, I mean, because that's the sort of thing that I think that they're thinking, is just an outdoor venue so that they can get more people. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and the thing that I was saying to people about this, because they were talking about, I was like, who wants to be outdoors in Florida in the summer when, and not even to mention that you have to time it with the rain and everything else, but who wants to be sitting outside in 90 plus degrees with a relative, humidity dew point around 70 degrees? Like, everyone's going to be sweating and miserable. I mean, it's not a good look for people to be sitting outdoors in the middle of the summer in Florida. So it's not going to be a good look for them either.
Yeah, there's a couple of good questions in the chat. Kame and Steve throwing a lot of stuff. And Steve comes back in and asks, do you think any third-party spoilers like Jill Stein in the general election? I think any of that is going to be so minor. It's not going to be like, I think the biggest example of that was Ralph Nader to Al Gore in 2000, because you think that those voters were those were not people that were going to vote for George W. Bush. Those were people that were going to vote for Al Gore and let themselves be convinced and thought that their vote would be better spent. And I'm sure they're very proud of the stand that they took voting for Ralph Nader, who, by the way, was, the knock on Al Gore was he was so dull and bland, but who's more boring than Ralph Nader? But anyway, so I don't see
we're not going to talk about Kanye?
Well, no, we're going to transition to Kanye right now. But, he's not, look, he's already got my vote. Look, I thought my wife and I were done having kids, but if you have a kid, you get $1 million. So I'm going to have 4 more kids. So I'm going to get $4 million. And
I missed that.
I think,
wow. I did too.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. You can't keep track of all of it.
And then in his first campaign rally yesterday, he talks about he almost aborted his child. He just lost the whole evangelical vote right then and there. I mean, I don't know what his strategy is. But
yeah, let's just say I'm more likely to vote for DMX than I am for Kanye. But that's just my own personal taste. I'm sorry. What were you going to say, Chelsea?
I mean, I was just going to say, we are living in such crazy times that even after that yesterday, and what clearly appears to be some kind of mental breakdown, that there would be people that would vote for him, and maybe he would act as a spoiler. I think what's interesting is that some polls indicated he might pull Trump votes, which would be amazing. That 2020 is such a crazy year that I wouldn't put it past us as a country that we turned Kanye 2020 into a legit spoiler.
Yeah, but I think that I feel like that's sort of a low impact thing. I don't see any candidates that'll make, on either side. There isn't anybody that's going to pull away a significant number of votes from either one of them. Now, yeah, all you got to do is peel off a few votes in one state. It'll make a big difference. But what are your thoughts about Yeah, I mean, Jill Stein. Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts, Scott, in terms of actual third-party candidates?
No, I agree with you guys. I don't see a third party candidate at this point being able to pull the type of numbers that we've seen in the past. And part of that is the fact that we're so polarized, that it's sort of one side or another. Both sides see the importance of voting for their particular candidate, even if they're not a big two-party person, because I have a lot of friends too that are very far to the left that are not big Biden supporters by any stretch, but they're voting for him rather than not, because they see the importance of the difference of giving that vote away. And I think the same thing is true on the other side of people that are too concerned of losing, of having Trump lose. And going back to what we said earlier, of those single issue voters that are interested in anti-abortion and Supreme Court justices and everything are going to vote for him instead of voting for maybe a different third party candidate. So I think either side is seeing the importance of being able to vote, even if it's not their first choice, to make sure that there aren't any spoilers this time. So I think in compared to years past, this will be a much smaller number for third party candidates.
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff we could talk about, but I thought there were good questions in the chat. So let's see. Back to Kama Egan. Since the majority of Congress have been in office for ages, do you think term limits should be imposed? We have talked a lot about that on the show. I think there very much should be term limits. I think there's a number that's right. I think, I don't know, not somewhere between 10 and 15 years. I know that might even sound like a lot, but when you think about people that have been around for 30 years, I think you might need some time to get some things done. I think more than 2 terms makes sense. What do you think, Chelsea, in terms of term limits? We're talking about for the Senate and the House specifically. Is there a number in your head that you feel like makes the most sense?
I'm with you. I definitely believe that we should have them something in the neighborhood of 2 or 3 terms. The only argument against it that I understand comes from libertarians who say I should have the right to vote for the same person if that's who I want. I can't really see all that much strength in that argument, but that's the only argument against it that I've heard. I'm not sure if you guys have heard anything that's
I
mean
that's sort of
another argument against.
What do you think, Scott?
I mean, that's sort of the argument to even say with a president too. When they put in term limits after FDR, and it's a fascinating story because they did it and went into effect during Eisenhower, and it was a Republican-led thing at that time because they didn't like the fact that FDR was there, and who knows how long he would have been in had he lived. But there is that argument. It's like, hey, if people are going to keep voting for this person, then they should be able to be in there as long as people keep voting for them. And if they lose confidence in them, they'll vote for someone else. But the problem is, like we all know, it goes back to the entrenchment and the money and how their lobbyists are affecting them and the amount of money they're pouring into these candidates. And if you're in a safe district because you've been gerrymandered, then essentially you can sit there forever. And I do think there should be term limits across the board, even with Supreme Court justices, because now you have Supreme Court justices that can live well into their 80s and 90s. As maybe back in the day, the longevity wasn't going to be there the same way that it is now. So you pick someone like a John Roberts at the age of 50, and now he's on the court for 40 plus years. We're seeing people live longer than they ever have before. And so there might be a real case to say maybe we should have term limits of like 18 years for Supreme Court justices or 18 years for the Senate. So they have 3 terms. That's 6 years each. The only one that you'd have to figure out is what do you do with Congress, because it's every 2 years. So that's a tough one. It's either you have to switch it so they have longer terms maybe, and they get 3 terms too, and they're 12 years. I don't know, but I do agree that when people stay entrenched, that does lead to a power dynamic, and that's where we get the corruption, because now they're in safe districts. And they're getting money from being influenced from corporations and other places, and then they start losing what they're really there for, and that's for the people. Where if you can keep rotating, getting fresh perspectives in there, that might be a better situation for democracy at large.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with all of that, and I don't know what the number is, but I think for the Supreme Court, look, depending on your side of the issue, you're glad that Ruth Bader Ginsburg hangs on, and then you might also just be like, what is this woman doing to herself? I mean, she's got all these health problems. So, the idea that you get to make those choices. Yeah, I mean, look, there have been plenty of justices that are certainly not stepping down when maybe they should, and I'm not saying that that's her or not. There's just regardless of your ideology, you can point to somebody that you think should have done that. We'll get one more question in before we wrap up. Back to Steve. Do you, Chelsea and Scott, think the Senate will swing to the Democrats? I do not. I think there'll be some shifting. But what do I just it's not like it's one seat. So what do you guys think?
Yes, I'm going for yes. And because I am dreaming of a Senate Majority Leader, Elizabeth Warren, and
still there.
that's
Dreaming the dream.
just gonna make my entire life.
I believe from Man of La Mancha, that song is to dream the impossible dream. Scott, what do you think?
I'm going to say yes on the more practical purpose that if Biden ends up, because as we've seen, 2016 was the first year that there was no split tickets. In the past, you saw all split tickets where someone would vote for president of one party and Senate of another. We've talked about governors winning in states that are not usually, blue or red states like Charlie Baker in Massachusetts or Steve Bullock in Montana. But I think this year, if Biden is able to pull enough people in some of these states, then for sure the Senate will follow too. And we're talking about multiple states with Colorado and Arizona, potentially Maine, North Carolina. So all it's really going to take if Biden wins is only 3 seats to flip. So it's not a lot when you think about Colorado and Arizona alone. But then you might have some surprises if the number's larger. You might be able to peel off Montana. You might be able to, peel off some of these other states that are close. Iowa's a lot closer than we thought. So I think on a more practical purpose, the Senate would shift because of the political ramifications of Republicans down ballot, and if Trump, is able to fail miserably in that sense, and Biden has a good night, he's going to pull a lot of the Senate over with him across the finish line too.
Yeah. And by good night, you mean good week because of how long the voting will take. But your point is made. Our final comment from Kama Egan. Kanye is still pissed Taylor Swift beat out Beyonce at the Grammys and is using his presidential run as a platform to support Beyonce. You're not wrong. I think that that is exactly the sort of thing that he would think of. If everybody wants to keep in touch with us, and why wouldn't you? You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And if you've enjoyed seeing the show, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's on The Blackcast. If you're watching it on Facebook, you can like The Blackcast, and then you'll be alerted when a new show starts and when you can tune in, which will often be around the same time. It'll be Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, but subject to change, so that's why you follow us. Chelsea, it's on the screen, but where can people find you?
At Chelsea Galicia.
And Scott, where can people find you getting into arguments with Mitch McConnell?
Which I told him today that Obama wore the tan suit better. At SMan80, that's SMan80.
But which one of them wore mom jeans better? That's our topic for next week. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Very fun to be able to incorporate the live comments. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, guys.